Welcome back. So, if you watched my first video on the unmasking process, you will already know that it is difficult for me as an ADHD person to stay in a lane. And that's going to be very clear on this channel. So, right from the get go, I want to make it known that staying in a lane, staying to one specific topic is not in the cards for me. So, if the topic today seems like a drastic jump from talking about my neurodivergent experience, that is going to be the norm here. So, as if talking about neurodivergence didn't already make me a bit of an outlier, this video and this series is just going to continue to show people that I'm a little weird. But that's not a bad thing, because if you're watching this, you're probably weird. I do think that my unmasking process and my spiritual development are very intimately tied. And over the last couple years, as I have unmasked, I've also really delved a lot more deeply into my spiritual practice. And part of that has been getting in touch with what I like to call my higher self. And I want to make it very clear that this is not coming from any specific religious context. This isn't coming from any specific set of teachings. This has really just been a result of my own personal development and my own experience. So anything that I'm about to teach you, I urge you to consider it, to meditate on it, but take it all with a grain of salt because your process might look very different than mine. It's just like the unmasking video. Like, if you're neurodivergent and unmasking, your process might look completely different. But I have been feeling really called to share this knowledge that I've gained. I don't want to be selfish and kind of hoard it for myself. I really do feel like I've learned some valuable things that I want to share. So, this is going to be the first part in a 3-part series on getting in touch with your higher self, with the universe at large, with, I don't know, the collective consciousness, your cosmic family, whatever you want to call it. I don't even really have a specific name for it. All I know is that as I meditate, as I experiment with psychedelics, as I dive into spiritual texts like the Tao Te Ching or the Classic of the Way or the I Ching, I'm tapping into an aspect of my consciousness that I've kind of just named my higher self. I've realized that behind my physical body and behind my mind, there is this aspect of my consciousness that is always there and has always been there, but it is this wise kind of, not omnipotent, but it's an aspect of myself that I can turn to in times of need, if that makes sense. So this first video is going to be about how to set the stage, how to go about beginning that journey, beginning to tap into this aspect of consciousness that I think that we all have access to, that we all have the ability to tap into. I don't think that it requires any kind of psychic ability or, magical power. I think that there is a wisdom and an inner knowing that we can all tap into in our own way. So this video is about phase 1 of that journey, which I like to call setting the stage. This is kind of clearing away the distractions, cleansing the body, cleansing the mind, and getting yourself to a place where you are even open to receiving messages from the greater universe. And I don't want to use words like God or anything like that because I don't want this to be a religious video. This is more about spiritual development. So it's not tied to a specific practice, like I say. So setting the stage is about getting yourself in to proper alignment and removing things that aren't serving you, removing whatever is hindering your pathways of communication to something greater than yourself, because so many of us are stuck in our own mind. We're replaying negative thoughts, limiting beliefs, and even if there was some kind of higher force, greater wisdom that was trying to reach out to us, a lot of folks would not even know what to look for. And even if the signs were there, they would be oblivious to them because they're so wrapped up in their own mind and in their own experience. So this is about just kind of opening up those pathways of communication. So I guess it's important to talk about why. Why would you even want to go through this process of attempting to communicate with deeper aspects of yourself, higher planes of consciousness. And I don't know, this is one of those things that I think is so highly subjective, and there's going to be different answers for different people. But for me, I think that I always had this awareness of, again, that inner wisdom or that inner aspect of myself that has always been there from the time I was a child to now. That aspect of me that's always been watching and waiting and silent, kind of in the background. But even in those dark moments, there's always been that kind of inner knowing, that inner wisdom. Maybe it's my conscience, maybe it's my higher self. I don't know. I feel that there is an aspect of me that is essentially just made of pure awareness, pure love, pure light, and it's not subject to the swings in emotion or the ups and downs of life. There's kind of this understanding that even though on the surface things may seem dire or chaotic, that when it comes down to it, I am a soul in a body having a human experience, but there is part of me that is eternal. And I really am trying to word this in ways that don't seem too woo woo because I don't want to scare people off. And I know that the spiritual community online can be a little bit overwhelming, a little bit campy almost. I really have a love-hate relationship with a lot of the spiritual content creators that I see online. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that I can necessarily give you the why. I think that you will come to the conclusion on your own that you desire a deeper connection to yourself, a deeper connection to the universe at large, and a deeper understanding of your own energy and your own place in the cosmic scheme. And I know this all sounds very nebulous, but it's because I'm not some spiritual guru who's been meditating on a mountain for 50 years. I'm only just a couple steps ahead of a lot of you. And a lot of the folks that maybe stumble upon this video are probably even miles ahead of me. All I can say is that I feel called to share this and I feel called to help guide whoever's willing to listen. But I don't have all of the answers, unfortunately. It'd be nice if I did. But all I can do is share what I know from my own experience. And I think that that is an important thing to note, is that even if you are a beginner to all this, even if you feel like you are kind of stumbling your way through it, when it comes down to it, you really need to trust your own intuition. And anytime that you come across a teaching or a method of doing things or any kind of advice, you need to really think on it and come to your own conclusion. There's nothing more powerful than your own intuition, and you will know what is right for you. And it's going to take time to trust that voice and to trust that inner knowing, but you'll get there. Just have faith in yourself. If I can do it, you can do it. Let's just say that. There was a time where I thought that I was the most spiritually cut off person and that I was never going to have any kind of experience that suggested that there might be something more. But here I am making a YouTube video about how to communicate with your higher self. So things change, I guess. So to begin with, and something that I really needed to start with, was working on my emotional reactivity. And this is really tied to my neurodivergent journey as well, because a lot of folks who are neurodivergent, especially ADHD, suffer with something called rejection sensitive dysphoria. And that is where there's this visceral fear of rejection from others. There's this constant fear that we're going to be cast out, that we're going to be shunned, that we're going to be rejected. And overcoming that was a big part of my spiritual journey, as well as my unmasking. So working on emotional reactivity, regulating your emotions, understanding that emotions that come up, we don't really have much control over. You know, even the most evolved person is still going to feel anger, is still going to feel irritability, is still going to feel the whole spectrum of human emotion. But what you need to work on is your level of reactivity. If emotions that come up are still completely throwing you off your center, completely throwing you off balance, you need to find ways to feel emotions, allow them to pass through you, but not allow them to control you, not allow them to paralyze you, not allow them to take over your rational mind. There are so many people that go into explosive displays of anger or get stuck in really paralyzing, painful cycles of grief. And something I like to talk about with my patients from a Chinese medicine perspective is that there is no unhealthy emotion. The only time emotions become unhealthy is when they are prolonged or when they are in excess of the situation. So let's say that you lose a loved one. Grieving is going to be normal. You should feel grief. It's healthy to feel grief. But if that grief is going on for years and years and years to the point where you cannot live your life, that is pathology. If your anger and your resentment and your frustration is so strong that it is dictating every action that you take and it is damaging your relationships, that is pathological. So it's not the anger, it's not the grief, it's the way that it is showing up and controlling your life. So working on emotional reactivity is a big one, because that will also help you from getting into those cycles of rumination and being stuck in those loops and those thought cycles. And the minute that you're able to kind of separate yourself from those really strong emotions, you already become more of a open vessel for communication. You also really need to just get to know yourself. And this is really difficult for people who have complex trauma, who maybe grew up as people pleasers. You spend so much time catering to others that you don't really know who you are. You don't really have much of a personality because so much of your life has been dedicated to pleasing others. So there needs to be a knowing of yourself. And that can be done through a lot of ways, but I find creative pursuits are really helpful. Journaling. For someone like me with ADHD, I find that grabbing a simple tape recorder and just recording myself talking out loud really helps me to get to know myself and get to know what my values are and get to know what I think about things. Because for the longest time, especially in my younger years through high school and university, I didn't really have much of an opinion on things. People would ask me about politics, or people would ask me about, these big questions, religion, life and death, things like that. And I didn't even know what my opinion was because I hadn't spent the time getting to know what my own values were. So it's really important to get to know who you are at your core, because the only way that you're going to be able to access higher aspects of your own consciousness is if you know who you are in this plane and in this realm and as a human being. So getting to know yourself is a big one. That also often means that you need to spend more time alone and get comfortable in solitude. So many people get so uncomfortable at the idea of even spending 24 hours by themselves. So they are constantly filling their calendar with hangouts or going to the club or seeing friends and family. And that's great. Human connection is amazing and necessary. But if you're unable and uncomfortable with spending time alone, that is something you need to work on. Because oftentimes when I am receiving messages from higher aspects of myself, it is in those times where I am completely alone and completely by myself. That's not to say that you can't receive guidance or wisdom when around other people, but I think it's a lot easier to hear what the universe has to say and make sense of it when you are in a quiet, solitary environment. It's also really important to start paying attention to your physical cues and your physical needs. I think a lot of people, and I see this with my patients, a lot of folks move through life completely disconnected from their physical experience. They almost are dissociating on a constant basis. Whether they're dealing with chronic pain or mental health issues, it's safer and more comfortable to just shut off the cues that your body is sending you. So you really need to start tapping into, how do I feel in my body? Where am I holding tension? Where do I notice, if I'm feeling stressed, things kind of coming up? And really getting comfortable with those physical cues. I think a lot of people view spiritual development as being separate from the body. But what I've realized over these last few years is that physical health, physical development, physical exercise is extremely integral in the process of awakening. So if you feel like you're cut off from your physical experience, you need to spend some time getting in touch with your body again. And not just getting in touch with your body, but being grateful for your body. I think so many people move through life at odds with their body. They view the aging process and the an illness as being this terrible thing. And in some ways it is painful and harsh, but I think that if you can begin to view your body as a blessing and view the cues that your body is giving as signs of what needs to change, and you honor those cues, and you're grateful for what your body is able to do rather than frustrated with what it cannot do. Again, I think that it just makes you a better vessel for communication. So, on that note, I think that working on priming your physical vessel as much as possible through activity, stretching, you want to get as comfortable as possible in your body. So that way, when you're doing things like meditation or more spiritual work, you're not going to be constantly distracted by these pain cues. When I first started meditating, I would sit there and all I would be able to think about was the tension in my back or the tension in my shoulders or the tension in my neck. So, working to try and ease those physical sufferings made the spiritual practices a lot more easy. I definitely understand that I am coming from a privileged place in the fact that I don't have chronic pain currently, that I'm very able bodied when it comes to my physical health. So, I mean, I don't know that I'm the best person to learn from if you are physically disabled or dealing with chronic pain because I don't have that lived experience. So, it may be better to learn from someone who is, I guess, in the same place as you. So, yeah, I think one of the most important aspects of this stage is really just priming your vessel, treating your body like a temple. And I know that that sounds cliche. And I hated hearing that as a young person forced to go to church. But that is one thing from Christianity that I do think is very true, is that you should be treating your physical body as something sacred. So, apart from just things like physical exercise and such, nourishing foods are also very important. And I'm not one of those people that thinks that you need to be eating organic fruits and vegetables only, vegetarian, vegan, raw food. Like, I don't believe that. I think that if you are consuming animal products, you should be mindful of where they come from as best as you can, grateful for what you have access to, and treating food and cooking and eating as a ritual and as a spiritual practice. But I think as long as you're doing your best to eat whole foods wherever possible, trying to cut down processed foods as much as possible, and limiting things that are going to cause stagnation to build up. So, cutting back on rich, greasy, sugary foods. Again, I am human, and I think that one of the best parts of being alive is enjoying good food. So I think that you can be a spiritual person and still eat cake and potato chips and, things like that. But you should really just start paying attention to how your body responds to what you put into it. So, for example, in my experience, I know that dairy does not sit well often. I'm not lactose intolerant, but I find that milk, ice cream, cheese, things like that, they cause phlegm and mucus to build up physically. I'm often clearing my throat and coughing things up, and my digestion suffers. So pay attention to what response your body is having to the things that you put into it, and try to focus on ingesting things that are going to be received well by your body. And I don't even think that that is for folks that are just diving into a spiritual practice. I think that this goes for everyone. If you want to live a healthy life, you should really just be paying attention to the responses that your body has to certain foods. I do think that there is some wisdom in the belief that more stimulating spices like, chilies, garlic, onions, scallions do stir up the mind and make things like meditation a little bit more difficult. It's the same with caffeine. So I've really cut back on coffee quite a bit. But again, just pay attention to how you respond. Don't follow someone else's instructions simply because you respect them or because you value what they have to say. You should really be using your own intuition and your own scanning of yourself. Take stock in your own physical cues. If you learn to listen to your body, then taking care of it becomes a lot easier. I think books and lectures on nutrition and on exercise are really great to start off when you have absolutely no idea what you're doing. But I think over time, as you begin to communicate and develop a rapport with your physical body and with your mind, that you start to develop an innate sense of knowing what is best for you. So these next couple things that I want to talk about are definitely ones that I still struggle with, and they're things that I have only started to put into practice over the last few months. So definitely take these with a grain of salt too, because while I do think that they are very important and necessary, understand that I do not have these perfected myself yet. The first one is finding an energetic baseline. What that means is that it is important to cut back on as many substances that shift your perception as much as possible. One example is that I was a very heavy smoker of weed for many, many years. But within the first week of stopping using it, I noticed that my clarity of thought improved drastically. I don't necessarily believe in a complete all or nothing, black and white world. I don't think it's necessary to be 100% sober, but I do think that we should be using things like marijuana, psychedelics, alcohol more as tools than as coping mechanisms that we use on a daily basis. There's a difference between utilizing a plant medicine for a specific effect in a more kind of ritualistic setting than using it as a numbing behavior. I will talk about psychedelics specifically more in the next video when I talk about phase 2, because I do think they are really helpful for opening you up to different ways of thinking and clearing out some of that psychic trauma that you've collected over the years. But I do think that most people have tendency to abuse and overuse these tools. And they're not being used as tools. They're being used either recreationally or, again, to numb or block out things that we don't want to pay attention to. So I think doing what you can to clear and find a good baseline is important. The one caveat that I will make is that what I'm saying in regards to recreational substances does not apply to medication. So if you are using a medication to manage anxiety, depression, anything, don't think that you need to stop using that. For me, my medication has been integral in helping me achieve that baseline. So don't take this yet. Don't stop using a medication that is necessary for your well-being. It's more those kind of optional recreational things that again, most people are abusing. On that same note, we want to try and stop numbing behaviors and distractions as much as possible. So that means not just binge watching TV to try and avoid emotions. That means not doom scrolling on social media. Again, I don't think that things are black and white, because for me, things like TikTok and YouTube are deeply spiritual tools. I do think that higher forms of consciousness use those tools to communicate with us. So I think that they can be used very intentionally. But again, you don't want to be using these tools as a as a way to numb uncomfortable feelings or to dissociate from your life. What I have started doing for myself is either spending longer periods of time with those apps deleted off my phone so that I'm not tempted to use them, or I only use them with a specific goal in mind. So I log on to TikTok and I say, okay, this is a question that I would like an answer to. So I'm going to look up videos specifically on that topic. Or I would like an answer to a specific question. So I'm going to scroll through videos hoping that the right thing will pop up and give me the answer that I'm looking for. But I'm only going to do that for a set, like 10 minutes. Controlling your consumption and moving from a place of consumption to creation, I think, is very important. So spending more of your time or a higher percentage of your time creating things rather than consuming things, I think is very important in this first stage. Another thing that I think is extremely important in order to develop a relationship with yourself on the worldly plane and in higher planes is to stop betraying yourself and breaking promises to yourself. So that means if you tell yourself that you're going to go to the gym or work out, that you follow up on that. Because every time you break a promise to yourself, it degrades that relationship that you have with that inner voice. And I think that's where a lot of discomfort and frustration and sadness comes from, is that we are so conditioned to comfort. And we've forgotten that discipline does play a role and that self-discipline is one of the highest forms of self-love. Try to keep your promises to yourself. Don't get me wrong, as someone who's neurodivergent, who suffers from burnout quite frequently, that doesn't mean that you can't reassess. If I'm having a day where I really do not feel physically like going to the gym would serve me, I acknowledge that, but I at least make the promise to myself that I will do a different physical activity instead, or I will reschedule. Just be careful. I try to not break promises to yourself as much as possible. Another aspect of this stage that has been useful for me is using things to help open up those upper chakras. Most people are living and spending most of their time and energy within the lower three chakras, which are very strongly tied to gratification of worldly pleasures, material desires, things like that. So you want to work your way up from the root chakra, the sacral chakra, and the solar plexus chakra, and start opening up the heart, the throat, the third eye, and the crown chakra. That can be through meditation, that can be through use of crystals, Reiki is super helpful for that. There are a lot of different ways. And I can share some resources on chakra-based work for those that are interested. But experimenting and kind of playing around with those higher aspects of functioning and those higher chakras really will help to open you up to that voice of the higher self. But that's, again, something that I'm still working on. So I mentioned at the beginning working on emotional reactivity. These other things are in that same vein, but doing work to combat limiting beliefs and then also shadow work, I think, is really important. Getting in touch with your inner shadow and realizing that even though you may be drawn to light work, to spirituality, to these very positive things, that every person has within them the capacity for darkness, for evil. We all have a shadow self, and it's important to not stifle that and push it down, but instead to integrate it and to realize that we are all complex beings with elements of light and dark within us simultaneously. I think that therapy, while it does have a lot of downsides in the West, I think there are some great therapists and counselors out there who can help you to navigate some of these things. But if you're not comfortable working with another person at this point, then there are a million books out there on combating negative beliefs, on working through cognitive distortions, on integrating the shadow. Just start seeking out those resources wherever possible. The last piece of this is really just keeping an open mind, being open to new experiences, new ideas, meeting new people, new ways of thinking. Because the thing is that As you begin to explore these higher aspects of consciousness, you may find yourself in scenarios that seem strange or different than what you're used to, or even unbelievable. So it's important to keep an open mind and not panic when you encounter something that seems foreign or scary. Trust that the universe won't expose you to anything that you're not ready to handle, and trust that you will be guided gently through this process. One of the simplest things that you can do at this stage is simply set intention. I don't even really think you necessarily need to be meditating at this point because you might not be ready for it. All you need to do is admit to yourself that there's a desire to know more and to explore, and vocalize it in some way to the universe that you're ready, that you're willing, that you are wanting that relationship, that communication. Write it in a journal, make a piece of artwork, or simply just say it out loud. Let the universe know that you are seeking a deeper connection, and it will listen. But I do think that you need to consent to the process, if that makes sense. I mean, I know that there are some people out there who have had these amazing psychic experiences and these amazing spiritual experiences with, I guess, where it doesn't feel like they're necessarily in control of it. But in my experience, I do feel like I need to be ready to take the next step, and I need to vocalize and prove that I'm ready to take the next step before the universe kind of ushers me into the next phase of my spiritual growth. So, what you can do at this stage, before you even start thinking about meditating or doing kind of like ritual practice, is I would practice body scanning, because this is really going to help with that physical aspect and kind of getting in touch with the cues that your physical body is sending you. So, body scanning is a really simple technique that I do pretty much every day now before bed, or anytime that I feel I need to. But you essentially start at the top of your head, and I like to imagine like a white, warm kind of uh, stream of water like pouring down onto my crown, almost like honey, I guess. And as it drips down over my scalp, my forehead, my jaw, my face, my neck, all the way down to my toes, as it passes each area, those muscles relax, and all the tension and all of the stress that is held in those muscles is released. And as you go, you want to try and keep each consecutive part of you relaxed. So keep your scalp relaxed as you move onto your face, and keep your face relaxed as you move onto your throat. And eventually you'll get to the place where your entire body is in a state of relaxation. So I think that this is a really good precursor to meditation and to, deeper spiritual practices. So I know that I have separated these videos into sections and phases. But the thing is that it might not be as cut and dry as I'm describing it. I'm letting you know the steps that I took, but some of you may already be doing these things. Like, you might not even need to do phase one because you're already there. Maybe you already have a good awareness of your body. Maybe you're already gaining an awareness of your energy. Maybe you have good control over your emotional health. Maybe you're already ready to move on, in which case I hope that there was something that you learned from this video. But don't feel like you need to start from step one just because that's the way I'm laying it out. Just, again, listen to your own intuition. But I think it is important to have a good solid baseline before moving on to some of those more advanced techniques, because I think you might become overwhelmed. And the other thing that not a lot of people talk about is that spiritual psychosis is a real thing. And if you move into these practices too quickly, you can kind of lose yourself. You can become so ungrounded and so untethered from your physical experience from diving into those higher aspects too quickly, and you become detached from reality. And you see people who are in a very imbalanced state because you can tell that they've lost that connection to their physical form. Spirituality should always be rooted in your body, because we are humans and we are here to have a physical experience. So don't lose sight of your senses, of your feeling, of your form. It's a blessing to be here in a body. It's not a curse. I know a lot of people want to think of it as like a meat suit, a flesh prison, but I think you will really come to love your body as you move through these practices. If you're looking for some introductory texts or books to start opening your mind to these ideas, I don't have an exhaustive list, but some of the texts that really have been beneficial for me are The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer and his podcast. Michael Singer's podcast is really amazing. Be Here Now by Ram Dass, who's a kind of a spiritual guru who's unfortunately passed away. Barbara Brennan, I believe, has a book called Hands of Light, and then another book called Light Emerging, which is really helpful at breaking down the auric field, the chakra system, but just start dabbling in learning more about the energetic body, energetic work. And again, I think that you will be drawn to the things that you need. I will be in a library or at a book sale, and I will just kind of turn around, and the book that I need at that exact moment will be sitting there right in front of me. Like, it's kind of amazing that all the tools that I've needed show up immediately when I need them. So, I mean, there's so many resources online. Just type in, best books on energy or the chakra system into Reddit, and you'll get a million different things. Like, that's one of the blessings of living in the age of the internet, is we have so much information at our fingertips. But it's important when you're looking at these texts, when you're looking at any kind of content about spiritual development, you think about who wrote it, what was their intention, do they have any inherent bias that may be playing into what they're writing? And again, keep an open mind, but also listen to your intuition. So I think that's about all I want to cover for those beginner phases. I don't necessarily know how long this will take for you. As I said, for some of you, this might take a matter of months. For me, it took almost 30 years. I feel like I'm just kind of entering phase 2 now. So be patient with yourself. There's no rush. And trust that you will arrive where you need to be exactly when you need to. There's no such thing to me as lost time, as being too late. I think that we all learn what we need to learn exactly when we need to learn it, and just trust that the path you are on is the path that you need to be on, and the path that you'll be most potent and effective on. So just don't worry if you are, quote unquote, past your prime, in your opinion. You could be doing this work in your 20s, you could be doing this work in your 80s. Just trust the process. The experience that you've had up to this point is going to be integral. The story that shapes you as a person is going to be integral in the work that you do from this point forward. So just be grateful for the experiences you've had, good and bad, and move forward with optimism. One really important thing on this journey, and one thing that I was guilty of in the beginning, is you want to avoid an air of superiority or ego. Just because you are feeling called to explore these things, just because you are feeling called to dive into these more spiritual and esoteric realms, does not mean that you are more enlightened or more spiritual than anybody else. You're not better than anyone for diving into this, and you can't force anyone else to wake up to these things. Some of the most spiritual and connected people that I know define themselves as being atheists. But when I watch the way that they interact with food, with music, with physical experience, when I see the way that they move through the world, it is the most spiritual and connected thing that I've ever witnessed. So I think it's really unfair to say that the only people who have it figured out are the spiritual gurus and the people who are meditating. I think that you can be a spiritual person and not be practicing stereotypical spirituality. So just really try to keep your ego out of it. If you are diving into these things, if you're feeling called to help raise the vibration of the collective, do it because you want to and because your intentions are pure. Don't do it because you want to appear more knowledgeable or more wise, or use it to put yourself on a pedestal above other people, because that is dangerous. And it's not what this is about. So just try to be humble throughout all of this. Even if you've been studying for years, there's still going to be mistakes that you make along the way. There's still going to be things that you don't know. No human being is going to have it all figured out. We're limited by our sensory experience. We're limited by our physical form. Like, that's kind of the point. We're not supposed to know it all. So just be careful with the knowledge that you gain. Do it for yourself, do it for the greater good. Don't use it as some kind of tool for power. The next video that I post will be about phase 2, which I call paying attention. So phase 1 was about setting the stage. Phase 2 will be about paying attention. And then phase 3 is about actually developing a relationship and a rapport and an open and ongoing communication with higher realms of consciousness.